Back to the US now, and the Washington Post is set to make major cuts impacting every department at the historic newspaper.
So these are huge, huge cuts, and they're going to do enormous damage to the newspaper's ability to cover its community, to cover the country, and to cover the world in all the ways that it should.
We're witnessing a murder and then took aim at the Post owner, Jeff Bezos. Bezos is the fourth richest person in the world, according to Forbes, with a net worth of about $260 billion. He's owned the Washington Post since 2013.
Jeff Bezos is facing open revolt after the Washington Post union demanded he reverse massive layoffs or sell the paper outright. Within days of cutting roughly a third of the newsroom and seeing his publisher step down, the battle exploded into a direct challenge to his ownership and leadership. This confrontation now turns into a brutal power struggle between billionaire control and a newsroom pushing to seize the future of one of America's most influential media institutions.
A statement from the company overnight has called the move a significant restructuring, while one Post reporter described the situation as a bloodbath.
Think about that for a second. Employees are telling a billionaire that his ownership is the problem. This is workers saying you're destroying this place, and if you won't fix it, you need to get out. That's a level of confrontation we almost never see in American media. The demand came after Bezos approved cutting roughly one-third of the newsroom in early 2025. Over 300 people lost their jobs. But it wasn't just about numbers. The entire sports department got gutted. The photography department was completely eliminated. Local coverage got slashed to almost nothing.
D.C.'s local paper, owned by billionaire Jeff Bezos, laid off a third of its staff and eliminated the entire sports department.
The reality is still very much shocking to those fired from the place they have worked at for years, and of course, a lot of the Post's readers.
Audio and video teams were cut. International desks covering places like Jerusalem and Kyiv lost their power. This wasn't restructuring. This was taking a chainsaw to the core of what made the Washington Post an actual newspaper. The union is calling it amputation, and honestly, that's what it looks like. Days after the layoffs hit, publisher and CEO Will Lewis resigned. The timing raised every red flag imaginable. The chief financial officer, Jeff D'Onofrio, stepped in as interim leader, which tells you exactly where priorities are heading. Lewis had been a disaster for months, presiding over absolute chaos inside the newsroom.
It diminishes the brand, it diminishes the coverage, it offers less to their readers. They're going to have fewer subscribers as a result of this, probably not more.
Editor Sally Busby left abruptly under his watch. Her replacement, Robert Winnett, got announced. Then the whole thing collapsed before he even started. Staff morale was in the gutter. But here's the question everyone's asking. Did Lewis take the fall for Bezos? Was he just executing a plan designed by ownership and then got thrown overboard when people got angry? Or did he actually lose control and get fired? Either way, Lewis is gone, but Bezos still owns the paper. And that's exactly what the union is targeting now. They're not mad at the guy who left. They're mad at the guy who's still writing the checks.
Well, I think that the Washington Post is going from being a paper that aspired to be a national newspaper to one that looks a lot more like a regional newspaper, at least for now. The Post was one of the few news organizations, national newspapers, that had foreign correspondents, had people all across the globe in different bureaus spread out over the world covering lots of major stories, and many of those reporters are now out of a job.
To really understand why this exploded, you need to go back to October 2024. The Washington Post announced it would stop endorsing presidential candidates. Sounds like a policy change, right? Except here's what actually happened. The editorial board had already written an endorsement for Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. Bezos personally killed it. He blocked his own paper from endorsing a candidate they'd already decided to back. The fallout was instant and brutal. Hundreds of thousands of subscribers canceled within days. Staff members quit in protest. The ones who stayed made their fury known publicly.
Unfortunately, we are grappling and have been with just major changes in the way sports news is delivered, shared, and experienced across the industry.
This was the breaking point. This was when the newsroom stopped seeing Bezos as the rich guy who saved the paper and started seeing him as a threat. Trust completely collapsed. The relationship between ownership and journalists went from tense to hostile overnight. Bezos responded with corporate speak that sounded like it came straight from an Amazon earnings call. He talked about readers giving them a roadmap. He emphasized data, efficiency, and sustainability. In his world, the solution is simple. Follow the metrics, cut what doesn't work, optimize everything for profit.
They've talked about resets several times, but it looks more like a retreat, just cutting staff. They have failed to actually articulate a real vision for what the Post should be and how it can best serve its customers and live up to the promise of its heritage and the ambitions that it has long set for itself.
But the newsroom heard something totally different. They heard journalism being reduced to click counts. They heard public service reporting getting sacrificed for revenue targets. They heard the logic that runs Amazon warehouses being applied to investigative journalism. One side sees a struggling business that needs discipline. The other sees a democratic institution being destroyed by spreadsheet thinking. The union's position is radical when you think about it. They're saying if you won't invest in the mission, step aside and let someone else own it. Mission over money. Institution over investor. They're arguing that just because you're rich enough to buy something doesn't mean you should be allowed to run it into the ground.
After today's cuts, which largely affected the international staff, many of the sports staff, the Post said it's closing down its sports section, essentially with the exception of a few reporters, getting rid of its books section and cutting universally across the board a significant number of employees. The Post hasn't said how many, but it's been reported that it's as much as a third of the newsroom.
This goes way beyond normal union talking points about wages and benefits. This is a challenge to the entire idea of billionaires owning newspapers. They're saying wealth alone doesn't give you the right to control something this important. And if you're going to destroy it, sell it to someone who won't. Bezos and people who think like him see this as completely absurd. In their view, employees who don't understand basic economics are trying to tell the owner what to do. If the business loses money, it has to shrink. That's reality, not cruelty. Workers don't get to override ownership just because they disagree with decisions.
Every single one of its Middle East journalists is reported to have been cut. Its Ukraine correspondent has tweeted over the course of the past hour that she too has lost her job.
The power structure is crystal clear. Ownership makes the calls. Employees can take it or leave. This idea that workers can pressure a billionaire to sell because they don't like his choices looks like organizational rebellion dressed up as moral principle. There's an ugly rumor making this situation even more explosive. Some of the employees who were laid off had previously signed petitions criticizing Bezos. They spoke out publicly. They challenged leadership decisions. They made their opposition loud and visible. And now they're gone.
I'm actually a local reporter. I was laid off today along with almost 300 of my colleagues. And it's been a really hard day at the Washington Post and also for those of us who are impacted and those of us who care both about the Post and also about this region.
Before we go any further, if you care about what's happening to major media right now, hit like, share this video, and subscribe. So now the question hangs in the air. Coincidence or retaliation? There's no hard proof either way, but perception can be just as powerful as evidence. It feeds a narrative that when budgets tightened, the most outspoken critics were first on the chopping block. It feels less like routine cost-cutting and more like dissent being quietly removed. And even if that isn't the reality, the fact that so many people believe it shows just how deeply trust inside that newsroom has collapsed.
And hundreds of thousands of subscribers canceled at that time, aggravating the financial problems that they had. Subsequent to that, he did all sorts of things that made things even worse. Appearing at the inauguration on the stage with Donald Trump, buying the Melania so-called documentary for an exorbitant price.
Let's talk about the money behind all this. Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013 for $250 million. At the time, it felt like a rescue. A tech genius saving a dying newspaper. Now in 2025, the paper has been losing money for years. Subscribers come and go. The whole news industry is collapsing as ad money flows to Facebook and Google. From Bezos' angle, the Post is a bad investment that needs major cuts, or it bleeds cash forever. But the union sees it differently. They see the Post as bigger than profit and loss. It's a public institution with responsibilities beyond making money. This is the clash between running media like a business and treating it like a pillar of democracy.
You know, I've worked at the Post for almost a decade, for a long time, and I've seen a lot of reductions and restructuring, and these are the most dramatic that I've ever seen, and in fact, I think they're among the most dramatic this newspaper has ever seen. I don't think anyone could have imagined the depth and the breadth of these cuts.
What's happening at the Post matters beyond just one newspaper's problems. Bob Woodward, the legendary reporter who took down Nixon, is reportedly devastated. Media people are comparing the Washington Post's decline to the New York Times, which actually figured out how to make digital subscriptions work. The fear across the industry is that this sets a terrible precedent. If Jeff Bezos won't sustain the Washington Post, what does that tell every other billionaire who owns a newspaper? Does media ownership become a hobby you drop when it stops being fun? Does every paper end up getting the same brutal cost-cutting treatment that killed local news across America?
So Google employees are demanding in a petition that the company does not bid on the cloud computing contract with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They say immigration officials are quote, perpetuating a system of abuse and malign neglect at the border.
This connects to something bigger happening in corporate America right now. Over 800 Google workers just signed a petition demanding the company cancel contracts with Homeland Security and ICE. They want to know what Google is building for immigration enforcement. Many signed anonymously because they're scared of getting fired. It's the same pattern as the Post, employees trying to push ownership on political and moral issues. Workers thinking they have some right to influence corporate decisions beyond their job descriptions. And the response from companies has been layoffs, silence, and restructuring that sends one message: employee activism doesn't actually change who has power.
I think they lack a moral core. And so all of that has driven subscribers away. And so for every subscriber that they get coming in through the front door because of the high quality news coverage, I think they're losing maybe 2 subscribers out the back door. Of course, I don't know the numbers exactly, but clearly they've been losing a lot of subscribers.
This whole situation comes down to 3 forces crashing into each other with no way to compromise. Bezos operates on owner logic. Cut the losses. Follow the data. Protect sustainability. His authority as owner is absolute, and he's not negotiating about it. The newsroom is having an identity crisis. They think journalism is a civic mission that can't be reduced to numbers. They think editorial independence has to survive ownership pressure. They think data shouldn't determine what truth gets told and what doesn't. The union chose an escalation strategy that's almost unheard of. They're treating the layoffs as a threat to the institution itself, not just to jobs. They're telling Bezos to sell if he won't invest properly. They're trying to use moral pressure against financial power in a fight where they have almost no leverage.
I think it's a really difficult, I think it puts the Post and its staffers in a really difficult position and kind of creates this difficult downward spiral where it makes it harder for the paper to recruit top quality journalists, which makes it harder for the Post to produce the types of stories that have a real big impact, which makes it difficult for the paper to sell ads, and which makes it slower for the subscriber acquisition and getting the number of subscribers, new subscribers on board.
What makes this different from every normal corporate fight or union dispute is how direct the challenge is. These aren't employees asking to be treated better within the system. They're questioning whether Bezos should own the Washington Post at all. They're publicly calling him unfit to run something this important. That's a revolt. And whether you think they're heroes defending journalism or activists who don't understand business, you have to admit this is explosive. One of America's most powerful newspapers is being ripped apart by a fight over who controls its purpose.
And I don't think that anyone who works here or has worked here is under the illusion that we are profitable or we're making money. It's been very clear that there is a crisis happening both in journalism at large and at the Post financially.
The workers just told the billionaire owner that his money doesn't give him the right to destroy what they built. They're demanding he either invest like he means it or sell to someone who will. Bezos is looking at spreadsheets and seeing a business that needs cuts to survive. The newsroom is looking at those same numbers and seeing an institution being sacrificed for profit. Neither side is backing down. The union has made ownership itself the issue. Bezos has made clear he'll run his property however he sees fit. There's no middle ground here, no compromise that makes both sides happy. This is a collision over fundamental questions about power, purpose, and who gets to decide what the Washington Post exists to do.
So now we're seeing, a diminished outlook. And I think that he became sort of detached in about 2019 when his marriage broke up, when Amazon was struggling later in 2020, when Amazon was struggling with the pandemic and all the aspects of that.
This fight is only getting started, and whatever happens next will send shockwaves through every newsroom in America. Because if workers can successfully challenge billionaire ownership at the Washington Post, that changes everything about how media power works in this country. And if they fail, it proves that money really does have the final say no matter what institution you're talking about. So what do you think? Should Jeff Bezos invest more and rebuild the Washington Post? Or is the union asking for something that was never theirs to demand? Drop your views in the comments.